A gale blew salt and cinders across Dragonstone's moonlit beach when the golden stranger appeared. Queen Daenerys Targaryen watched from the cliff stairs as her unsullied soldiers surrounded a towering man who had emerged from the crashing waves. He wore tattered, alien garments of gold and blue. Seawater steamed off his broad shoulders. Though ringed by spears, the man's eyes, blue in color, showed not fear but weary confusion. "Name yourself," shouted Grey Worm, the commander of Daenerys's guard, his spear leveled at the stranger's chest. The man slowly raised his hands. "I mean no harm," he said, voice calm, even as wind whipped salt into his face. He glanced up, meeting the Dragon Queen's gaze, where she stood above. Daenerys's pulse quickened. This Robert, as he later called himself, did not plead or panic like a shipwrecked sailor. There was a quiet dignity in his stance that gave her pause. Two Unsullied moved in with chains. In a blur, the stranger snatched a spear from mid-thrust and snapped it in his bare hands. The steel tip clattered to the rocks. The soldiers stumbled back, startled. Daenerys lifted a hand, staying her guards even as her heart pounded. Overhead, Drogon circled and roared, attuned to his mother's alarm. "I am Daenerys Stormborn, Queen of Westeros," she called out over the wind and waves. "Who sent you? What are you?" The man lowered his head slightly, rainwater dripping from his golden hair. "I come from a far-off world," he answered, each word heavy with truth. "Just a man, and something more." His cryptic reply only deepened the unease. At Daenerys' side, Tyrion Lannister narrowed his eyes, taking in the stranger's peculiar garb and unflinching calm. Drogon, impatient with talk, descended behind his mother in a blast of wet air. The black dragon stalked forward, placing himself between Daenerys and the intruder. A growl like thunder rolled from Drogon's throat. Still, the golden man did not flee. He stood firm, even as the dragon's enormous head snaked low, smoking jaws opening inches from his torso. Daenerys's violet eyes flicked from the stranger to her draconian son. In that breath, she decided to test this unearthly visitor's mettle. "Dracarys," she whispered. Drogon's jaws spewed a torrent of flame that engulfed the stranger in an inferno of orange and red. The beach lit up like a second dawn. Sand melted to glass under the dragon's fury. Grey Worm and the Unsullied fell back, arms raised against the blistering heat. Tyrion shielded his face with his cloak, shouting in alarm, but his words were lost in the roar. For a full heartbeat, Daenerys felt a pang of regret. Had she just incinerated the only being who dared claim neutrality in this war-torn land? Then Drogon's fire ceased. In the billowing smoke stood a human silhouette, unbowed. As the smoke drifted out to sea, the stranger emerged unharmed, not a hair singed, skin utterly unburnt. His eyes now shone like hot blue coals. A collective gasp rose from Daenerys' followers. This man had endured dragon flame as if it were no more than a warm breeze. Drogon hissed in frustration, tail lashing. The golden man turned a steady palm toward the dragon's snarling maw as if to soothe a restless stallion. Daenerys realized her mouth had fallen open, fear twisted with wonder in her gut. Whoever or whatever Robert was, he might be more powerful than anything she had ever encountered. Before anyone could react further, the stranger bent his knees and leapt straight upward. In a rush of wind he shot into the sky, like an arrow loosed by a god. Within heartbeats, the golden figure was a distant speck among the clouds, leaving Daenerys and her retinue staring after him in awed silence. By the next dawn, ravens carried word of the midnight miracle across Westeros. In King's Landing, Queen Cersei Lannister received the reports with thinly veiled dread. A man who survived dragonfire and flew like a wraith. Some whispered Daenerys had summoned a demon from the Red Waste. Cersei dismissed such talk in public, yet behind closed doors her mind raced. If true, this stranger could upend the careful Game of Thrones she'd played. Scowling, she vowed that this golden monster would be destroyed or ensnared before he could threaten her reign. Even as she spoke, she found herself glancing toward the shattered window of the throne room, half expecting to see a golden silhouette against the morning sky. But Robert, known in another reality as the Sentry, was already far beyond Cersei's reach, drawn north by whispers of a greater threat. He soared over the riverlands and snow-dusted hills of the north faster than a storm wind. During the tense parley at Dragonstone, he had overheard frightened talk of an undead army gathering beyond a great wall of ice. An army that neither dragon's fire nor castle walls could stop. He had fought monsters and madmen in his own universe, but an enemy that could extinguish all life itself. That stirred a deeper fear in him than any foe before. Black-clad sentinels on the wall glimpsed a streak of gold race across the dawn sky, vanishing into the haunted forest beyond. Snow-laden pines bent and crackled in the wake of his passage. Robert alighted in a silent glade of frosted trees, and the cold bit into him even through his torn attire. An unnatural hush lay over the woods. No birds sang, no animals rustled. Only the faint creaking of distant ice disturbed the quiet. Robert's breath billowed white as he scanned the tree line. So this is what death has done to the world, he thought, a chill, deeper than the wind clutching at his heart. Without warning, the shadows between the trees came alive. Dozens of dead men shambled out from the dark hollows, whites, their eyes glowing a cold blue. They were clad in remnants of black and northern wool, some still bearing the marks of their old lives. A night's watch cloak here, a farmer's tatters there. Now they were all the same, puppets of the long night. Robert's jaw tightened. He would grant these souls peace. With a burst of speed, he charged the horde. The first wight lunged with a rusted sword. Robert's fist shattered its skull before the blade fell. He spun, kicking another in the chest so hard the corpse burst apart. The dead kept coming, silent and relentless, clawing with frozen fingers and jabbing with broken weapons. Robert moved through them like a golden whirlwind, every punch caving in a ribcage, every swing of his arm knocking heads from shoulders. Bones crunched and brittle limbs snapped under his onslaught. Yet the whites felt no pain, no terror. Even as he tore them limb from limb, more pushed forward, numb to anything but their master's will. A shrill shriek split the night air. The pack of whites parted, and from their midst stepped a tall, gaunt figure with flesh as pale as snow and eyes like radiant sapphire. A white walker, sword of ice gleaming in its grip. It regarded Robert with timeless malevolence. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then the other flashed forward, inhumanly quick, its blade arcing for Robert's neck. He raised an arm to block. Crash! The White Walker's frosty sword shattered against Robert's forearm, exploding into glittering shards. The other's icy eyes widened in shock. Robert drove his fist straight through the Walker's armored chest. The creature burst apart, in a cloud of crystalline fragments, destroyed before it could even scream. Silence descended as the remaining whites paused, swaying uncertainly without their frosty lieutenant. Robert stood amid heaps of fallen dead, chest heaving though he needed no air. His superhuman eyes scanned the dark trees for any new threat. Wisps of icy fog snaked through the clearing, coiling around the broken bodies at his feet. A deeper cold seeped into the air, raising the hairs on Robert's arms. Something was coming. A crack like thunder rent the sky. At the edge of the glade, a tall figure emerged from the darkness, the Night King. The ancient White Walker's crown of bone and ice glinted in the dim light as he surveyed the intruder. His gaze was calm, cruel, and curiously assessing. In one hand the Night King carried a spear of pure ice. Behind him, the shadows teemed as an endless horde of whites crowded between the trees, awaiting their master's command. Robert's fists clenched at his sides. He had hoped to avoid unleashing his full power in this world. He knew too well how terrifying it could be. But here, at the edge of the world, facing an enemy that would never stop, he felt a familiar darkness stir inside him. I cannot fail, he thought. I will not let this realm fall. The Night King tilted his head, then drew back his arm, and hurled the ice spear with all the force of an avalanche. At that same instant, the horde of dead rushed in from all sides with a collective hiss. Time seemed to slow as the gleaming spear hurtled toward him. Robert closed his eyes for a fraction of a heartbeat and embraced the power coiled within his soul. When his eyes snapped open, they blazed with golden light. He answered the attack not with steel, but with the fury of a living sun. A blinding nova of energy erupted from Robert's body, turning night into day. The ice spear vaporized to steam in mid-flight, never touching him. A wave of radiance poured out in all directions, washing over the charging dead. Whites ignited like dry kindling and crumbled to ash by the hundreds under that searing glow. The forest itself lit up in stark relief, every branch and twisted face locked in a tableau of golden fire. The Night King raised one hand, summoning a wall of opaque ice from the ground to shield himself. But the flood of light shattered the frozen barrier as if it were glass. The ancient King of Winter had one frozen moment to look into the heart of the inferno consuming his army. Then the golden light slammed into him like the wrath of a god. The Night King's body erupted in a flash of embers and snow, and when the light faded, nothing of him remained but a smoldering scorch mark on the frosted earth. As suddenly as it began, the radiance winked out. Darkness crashed back over the woods. Robert knelt in the silent, steaming ruin of the glade. All around him, the army of the dead lay in heaps of charred bone and smoldering flesh. The very snow had melted in a broad circle around him, leaving muddy, smoking ground. The only sound was the soft patter of cinders falling and the distant crackle of burning trees. High atop the wall, a handful of Night's Watch sentries stood frozen in astonishment, their black cloaks whipping in the wind as they stared at the impossible dawn that had blossomed and died to the north. Robert rose to his feet. He had done it, he had saved this world from the long night. Yet, as he surveyed the devastation, he felt no triumph. In saving the living, he had revealed that he could slaughter them just as easily. The knowledge gnawed at him. Smoke rose in twisting plumes from the scorched forest, carrying with it the acrid stench of death. Robert bowed his head. This victory had come at a terrible price, one only he would ever truly understand. With dawn's first pale light creeping over the horizon, the golden man lifted into the air once more. In the eerie quiet, his departure went unnoticed by the stunned brothers on the wall below. Robert Reynolds, the stranger from another sky, flew south, leaving behind the ashes of an enemy, and perhaps a part of himself, amid that silent, haunted wood. At Winterfell, a stunned hush fell in the great hall as the raven's message was read aloud. Jon Snow and Daenerys listened in disbelief. In one night, beyond all hope, the army of the dead had been annihilated. The long night was averted by a massive blaze of light north of the wall. No one knew the cause or the source, only that when the sun rose, there was nothing left of the dead but drifting ash. Soft gasps and weeping rippled through those gathered. Northerners and Dothraki, and Unsullied who had steeled themselves for a doomed last stand that now would never come. Jon let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He exchanged a look with Daenerys. The queen's eyes were glossy with relief, but confusion knitted her brow. In her heart she knew who was responsible. He did it, Daenerys whispered under her breath. The stranger saved us all. There was a tremor of awe, and perhaps frustration, in her voice. She had crossed half the world to save the realm of men, yet in the end it was his hand, not hers, that delivered the fatal blow to death itself. Jon rested a gloved hand gently on Daenerys' shoulder. "We will likely never see him again," he said quietly. His tone held equal parts admiration and melancholy. "He asked for no crown, no reward. Perhaps that is for the best." Daenerys nodded uncertainly. Gratitude warred with wounded pride in her chest. High above Winterfell's battlements, one of her dragons let out a restless keen, as if calling out for the one being who had cowed even the dead. In the weeks that followed, the tale of the Shining Champion spread like wildfire across the realm. Around hearths and campfires, they called him by many names: the God of Dawn, the Sun Warrior, the Lightbringer Reborn. The Red Priests of Volantis proclaimed that the Lord of Light himself must have sent this radiant savior to fulfill prophecy. In the streets of King's Landing, small folk whispered that the stranger, that pale god of death from the faith of the Seven, had taken a golden avatar to punish the wicked. Queen Cersei loudly scoffed at these stories, dismissing them as northern lies. But those close enough to the Iron Throne could see the unease in her eyes. She secretly ordered Qyburn and her spies to scour the skies and report any sign of a golden man. Power, after all, tolerated no rival. Yet the golden man did not reappear. He remained as elusive as the wind, as if he had never been more than a dream. Far in the frosty northern wastes, on a lonely peak of the shattered wall, Robert Reynolds watched one sunrise bleed into another. In the silent company of auroras and bitter winds, he reflected on the world he had saved, and on the terrible force he had unleashed to do so. He felt no glory in what he'd done, only a fragile hope that perhaps, this time, his power had wrought more good than harm. The darkness inside him was quiet now, its whispers silenced by the biting cold and the memory of light. Pulling the tattered remnants of his golden cloak around his shoulders, Robert closed his eyes and flew into the clear morning sky. The sun's rays caught, for an instant, on his form, a last glimmer of gold against the endless white. Then he was gone, a solitary guardian returning to the realms of myth and rumor. Years later, the people of Westeros would still speak of that fateful winter's night. They would tell of how a being mightier than any king or dragon struck down the long night and then vanished before dawn. In their songs he became both hero and warning, the nameless stranger who proved that gods could indeed walk among men. Farmers in the Reach would pause, at daybreak, remembering when darkness turned to light, as if by divine command. Proud lords and ladies would glance uneasily at the sky on cold mornings, recalling how their crowns meant nothing when something greater stepped onto the stage of the world. And though debates raged in taverns and halls, was the Golden Man a savior blessed by Rella, or a fallen god who might one day return in wrath? None could deny the new truth that his coming had revealed. The long night ended, but something far more unsettling remained. The knowledge that the world could be unmade, just as easily as it had been saved.